I hope you're having a good Wednesday evening on this October 12th. This is your 28storms.com and Hurricane Tracker app tropical weather update. First, starting in the eastern Pacific, the tropics are finally beginning to wind down for at least some period of time, but the risk is not completely gone, especially over inland portions of Mexico, where Tropical Depression Jova is still trying to rain itself out over some of the higher terrain, and the risk of flooding will continue. But the flooding risk is not limited to southwest Mexico. We also had a tropical depression form in the Gulf of Tehuantepec within the last 24 hours. That is Tropical Depression 12E. Thankfully, it is moving over land now, so it's not going to intensify any further, but we have the risk of heavy rainfall across much of Central America, and more toward the west over the open waters. We're still dealing with Tropical Storm Irwin. However, there's really not that much left of Irwin, and it's not forecast to make a direct hit. The latest enhanced infrared satellite shows what is left of Hurricane Jova over much of southwest Mexico. The threat of heavy rainfall will persist for at least another 24 hours or so, and it sounds like much of the coastal communities were hit quite hard within the last 24 hours. It sounds like much of Manzanillo, Mexico was under 3 feet of water, at least earlier this afternoon, and some of the smaller communities just to the west and northwest of Manzanillo were apparently hit the hardest, with several roads being washed out, and I know of at least 2 fatalities, and those were from mudslides. But one bit of good news is that the eastern Pacific is now beginning to quiet down. It's really hard to even make out what is left of Tropical Storm Irwin more toward the south. In fact, if the current satellite trend continues, I highly doubt that the Hurricane Center will continue advisories in the next 12 hours. So therefore, if we switch a little bit more toward the east over the far northeast Pacific, we see that the circulation of Tropical Depression 12E has already moved well to the north, and it's going to remain a broad area of low pressure over much of Central America, providing the risk of some isolated and occasional heavy rainfall for the next several days. Switching over to the Atlantic side, we see that the overall tropics are fairly quiet. You can see the remnants of Tropical Depression 12E a little bit better here over far southeast Mexico. And again, this will be the one spot to look for in terms of any chance for tropical development. If this broad area of low pressure begins to extend over the extreme western Caribbean, that could be a focal point for a low pressure development in the next 3 to 8 days. However, some of the models are showing this system remaining over land for the most part, which would greatly mitigate the chance of development. And elsewhere, much of the Gulf Caribbean and Western Atlantic are not very favorable for development at this time. You can see on the water vapor that much of the deep tropics are being dominated by westerly winds and mid to upper level troughing. All that being said, we still have well over a month to go for hurricane season 2011, and the enhancing phase of the Madden-Julian oscillation is now anchored well over the deep tropics. We can see on the latest MGO model forecast that it's currently moving into phase 8, and it will continue to move more into phase 1 as we go into the middle and latter half of October. And this is a typical favorable setup for Western Atlantic, or especially more so Western Caribbean and Southeast Gulf of Mexico development. The latest 12Z CMC model forecast for the next 6 days does not show any organized tropical cyclones developing, but it does leave the window of opportunity for some type of organization surrounding Central America if any one of these little lobes of low pressure begins to venture out into the open waters. The latest 18Z run of the GFS shows this possibility quite well. However, it is developing 2 areas of low pressure more so on the eastern Pacific side of Mexico, and that possibility is just as legitimate as the chance of any Western Caribbean low development. The ECMWF model has been alluding to the possibility for some type of Western Caribbean low for the last several days, and it is continuing with that trend as we work our way into day 4, or Sunday morning. We see a 1007 millibar surface low to the east of the Yucatan Peninsula, and as we work our way into Monday and Tuesday, this very well could be a weak tropical depression or tropical storm trying to work its way more toward the west-northwest, making landfall near Cozumel, Mexico. And as we go into Wednesday, we see that the broad area of low pressure is being stretched out a little bit from southwest to northeast in advance of this approaching mid to upper level trough over the southeast United States. So the bottom line is that none of the models are showing anything overly intense in the Atlantic basin, and the main emphasis over the next 2 days will continue to be the risk of flooding over much of Mexico and the remainder of Central America. So thanks again for tuning in to 28storms.com. Please check again sometime tomorrow for another video update for the tropics and the eastern Pacific and Atlantic Basin.